Hey everyone, my name is Walker White. I'm currently taking Communications 1100 through eCore with Professor Mendez. Um, the last 2 weeks we've been learning about the models of communication. The three models of communication we've learned about are the transmission model, the interaction model, and the transaction model. But my job was to take these three models and their information and create my own model to show you how I think communication is best represented. But before I get to my model, I want to show you about the models that we've learned about. And the first one is the most simple model. It is the transmission model. It's considered simple and linear. There is a sender, and there is a receiver, and there's a message channel with possibility of noise, which is anything that interrupts the message. Uh, it is an example of this is a radio signal, as it's created and encoded by the sender. It's sent through the message channel and received and decoded. This is important because there's senders and receivers. There's no feedback. It's just sending, sending, and receiving. Um, the next model we learned about is the interaction model, and this model is a little different, a little more complicated, as each person is a sender and a receiver, and feedback is constantly happening. And this feedback is created through physical context and psychological context. Um, the last model we learned about is the most complicated model. Um, it's going to take your people that were senders and receivers and call them communicators. It refers to them as communicators because the communication is constantly happening. They're not purposely sending and receiving messages, it's just communicating, it's just happening. But the message they're creating for one another, that's created with the physical and psychological context. It's also created with cultural context, relational context, and social context. Now, cultural context can be anything from age and your sex, it's a sexual orientation, your relational context, just how well you know the person, and then the social context is just social norms. You're taught not to lie to somebody. That is the perfect example. Um, but with those three models, I took the last two because I felt the first one was a little simple, as you would say. Um, Here's my model. I created it. You got the communicators. It's pretty much the same as the transaction model, except for feedback is involved. There's constant feedback, and there's a chance of noise happening that wasn't included in the transaction. But I agree with this one because I feel that it best represents how people actually communicate. Uh, Whether or not you know it, you're always communicating with somebody, and this shows it, and it shows you what you use to communicate with that person. So the book, it says that communication is the process of generating meaning and sending and receiving verbal and nonverbal messages and signs that are influenced by multiple contexts. And I believe that my model shows that verbal and nonverbal communication happens the best with this model, and I really think that it helps show that. And thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.